Greek mythology. And I kept wondering, who is this Maitreya that's coming, you know? And that's who I think this Maitreya is. I think it is Cain. I think it is going to be Cain incarnate, just as this Sananda that comes is Satan incarnate, and this woman that comes is Eve. And so I think that's how you have your whole Greek mythology thing of Nimrod and Semiramis and Tammuz, their son, and you have all these eons of folklore and legends around the Greeks. The thing that lulled the church to sleep with is the word mythology, because they say it's mythology, and so everybody in the church thinks it's fiction. But the Latin word for mythology means history. It doesn't have anything to do with fiction. Yeah, they kind of fictionalize it so it's easier to grasp, because then they get ridiculous. These beings die, and they put them in the stars as constellations, and blah, blah, blah. They worship them. And any kind of form of worshipped being, or either be a being or a thing or anything, if it's worshipped, a demon can attach itself to it, you know, and they do that. And so all of a sudden you're into demonic worship, you're into demon worship, which is Satan worship. And so, you know, that's why I have to be very careful about all that stuff. But that's kind of, when you go back into the Greek folklore about the whole thing of Nimrod and Semiramis and Tammuz, because you'll see Satan trying to duplicate his coming and his ascension to earth and through all these mythologies and stuff. Explain more about his way out. Yeah, you see, I wish I could. And so I'm just throwing that out there, folks, because even when I saw her picture on, and I even listed, I have it on my own website, SherryTalkRadio.com. Go to my part about Maitreya. Even at TheWatcherFiles.com I have it. At SherryShriner.com I have it. I'd spent a lot of time on this Maitreya last year, setting up sections on each of my website about this Maitreya, because I believe he's Cain. And I'm going to just come out and say that on the air tonight and make it official, because I often talk to my friends, apart from being public, because I sometimes I don't know why I have the thoughts I do, and the ones that keep hitting and pounding me all the time. And I know it's the Lord speaking, but a lot of times I just can't grasp it. I'm not ready to come out public with anything. But yeah, you know, it's about time, because I've just had the same thoughts for too long. That this Maitreya is Cain. Something has something to do with Cain, whether he is the actual Cain or the spirit of Cain incarnate. But this Maitreya coming, this one that's going to lead Islam, is Cain. And this woman is Eve. And the reason I say she is Eve and not Lilith is because the Lord had admonished me when I had sent all that stuff out last time about Lilith, the Queen of Heaven. And he set me straight. Well, she is the Queen of the Abyss. And the Abyss and Heaven are two different things. And see, I didn't realize that at the time. And it's something I also learned in the codes recently, is that the Abyss and aerospace are two different things. And so, when you look at terms relating to the Abyss, you're looking at things that are outside, basically the planets way up there, where the planets are, and the star constellations. And when you look at aerospace and heaven, you're looking at like just the first and second heaven here, like the moon, the sky up here, and the moon, put it that way. Things that aren't way, way, way up there. And so Lilith being the Queen of Heaven simply because she was, what do you call it? The word's escaping my mind. She had both sexes, both genitals. I can't even think of the name. Somebody shoot me an IM and straighten me out. Can't think of the word for it. But they have both. She was both a male and a female. And if you look at Mithra, the Buddha god, Mithra, that was the same thing. It looked like a Buddha. It looks like a female, but she has a penis, and so they have both sexes. And so that's exactly what Lilith was, and Lilith could produce hundreds of children a day. She was not, the one thing the Lord told me was she was a separate creation. She was a totally separate creation. She was the Genesis 1 creation. And I've talked about it before, that there were two creations, one in Genesis chapter 1 and one in Genesis chapter 2. Lilith was the one and made out of clay in chapter 1. And so she wasn't, she never fell, which is interesting because she walked away from Adam. The Hebrew legends have it that she was just disgusted with the whole sexual thing with Adam, and so she left him. She is immortal because she never fell. She never sinned against God. So she's immortal. She's an immortal being. But she can procreate her own races, and that's what she does. And so you wonder where all of these beings, hermaphrodite, that's it, thank you. They're hermaphrodites. You wonder where a lot of these demonic beings and spirits come from? That's what she's producing. That's what this Lilith, that's why she's the queen of the abyss, the queen of space, is because she's inhabiting space with these eons of demonic spirits that she's given birth to. And so that's very interesting. But she's separate. And then you have Eve, who was promised immortality in some way by Satan, if she had rejected the Lord. Because, you know, he tried to get her to eat this apple, and the whole thing was figurative in the Garden of Eden. It wasn't really an apple. If you look at the explanation on it at my website, serpentseedline.com, it was all just covering up a sexual relationship that she had had with Lucifer. And so later in life, she ends up getting deceived again by these demonic angels, these watchers that had fallen to earth, and they led her astray. And it's interesting, I always said this too, is because the Hebrews don't keep records on the women, and it's like, why not? What are you trying to hide? And I always felt that the whole reason was they were hiding something, because they have them when they want them. If you wanted Mary's records, it's listed, and her genealogy's listed, and if you want Esther's records, or Ruth, or anybody else, they're listed. And they say, well, it's a man's world, it's a man thing, they only kept records of the men. And I think it's hogwash. I've always felt they're trying to hide something. And that's exactly why, because they Cain never mentioned in the genealogy of Adam, and then you don't find out, what happened with Eve. Where did she die? When did she die? They leave you with all these things hanging by other books that are put out and produced that go along with Jewish myths and become Jewish folklore, and then some of that's part true and part false, and you don't know what to believe because they always cover up the truth with lies. So it taints the whole thing. If part of it is truth, you throw the whole thing out because then something else isn't the truth. Part of it's a lie. And so they play games. There's a lot of games. And that's why when Yahushua was here, he hated the scribes and Pharisees, and he was angry at Israel for allowing the scribes to take over. Because the scribes were writers. They were the historians. They wrote everything down. And it was the serpent seed, these fake Jews, these false Jews, who Israel had allowed to become their scribes. And so these scribes they're entrusting their history and their lineage and everything about them to the serpent seed line. They're going to keep an accurate history. And they end up changing the Torah as it was and coming out with their own called the Talmud. Talmud worshippers today worship Satan's Bible. The Talmud is Satan's Bible. It's not the Lord's. It's not the Torah. It was written by the serpent seed. And so there's just so many things that have been covered up. And you just sit here and you try to dig through it and find out, okay, well, if I say this, they're really going to think I'm nuts. But you know what? You have to do something when you're searching for truth. And it's there, and somebody else has a different part, because I know how the Lord works. He gives somebody one part, and somebody else another part, and somebody else another part, and then we can all put it together, put the puzzle together. And that's how the Lord works. He rarely gives anybody the entire truth about anything. He gives us pieces, and He gives you in part. And so